today we are continuing our discussion to the earlier discussion, and let me just get the data sets right, and then perhaps I just wanted to touch base on the understanding of the smart contracts, and particularly I would be touch basing on some of the sectors which I thought that would be an interesting discussion henceforth. So I'll just put myself on mute and we'll start in a while. Okay, so this use case study would be in terms of understanding the NFT sector, and perhaps when we are trying to understand the NFT sector, that is the non fungible tokens, we are also looking into the impact of the apparatus, the softwares around the same, which are utilized to create the NFT at the first place. NFT, the core concept or the core understanding is something which is limited in numbers and it cannot be replicated, and the same can be verified through the online coding world. And there are a lot of stuff around the same. However, the understanding of the same till, or I would rather say on the timeline, we are in 2025. It's bizarre. So let's understand this. So perhaps it's to okay, visualization itself, and we talk about the UIs is user interface. However, what is the classification of visualization in terms of understanding the best of the understanding of how the characterization is performed? And that is under the visualization is G06F 16/44. Then we have manipulating 3D models or images for computing graphics. That is G01619/00. And for the service industry itself, we have G06Q50/10. So, so this is to understand the AR VR aspect of the steps which are performed by artists. And when we are trying to understand the AR and the VR aspect, we are actually taking into account and developing models which are small language models, and these models itself are utilized to identify the steps which the candidate can perform depending upon an exercise or multiple exercises given to the candidate in real time, and the candidate is performing those exercises, and depending on those exercises we can retrieve the data set from the database itself for orchestrating few more steps for the artist to perform, and that can be converted into NFT of some sort. So we'll just walk you through that first. I'm putting myself on mute. I'll take maybe 2 minutes just to get the data set ready, particularly from the standpoint view of understanding and how to mitigate the energy consumption and utilize the energy which can be generated from the waste itself. So we are actually not utilizing AC or DC current for the same. Okay, so in this particular event of creating a smart contract, what is the database which we are creating from the artist point of view? Now, artist, one of the candidate is an artist. An artist is somebody who is utilizing the body parts to orchestrate a step. So, in this particular apparatus, or you can always call it a chaos also, there is a motion based database which is storing the motion capturing data, and that includes a number of motions which are part of somebody else's way of performing a orchestration based on a song. Now, the database itself, also has the bifurcation, or we are just bifurcating the same into biomechanical information that includes kinematic information, kinetic information, and energy consumption information. For example, it could be BPM in one of the use case studies, or in many words, we call it as embodiment also. So here the user interface is able to utilize the UI, and the candidate provides a query to understand a target motion which is based on a section motion. So the motion itself, which is biochemical in nature, is divided into multiple subtypes. And we discussed this earlier, so you have to go back to the earlier discussions where we discussed the word sub, sub. It's a prefix. um, if we consider it as a prefix, it can be suffix also in some ways, but I'm not getting into that nomenclature today. When we consider this as a prefix, so this is always a tiny portion of a bigger picture. So to understand here is what is allowed at the back end of the admin. What is allowed here is there's a live camera feed which is capturing the image. It is capturing the data set points of the biomechanical way, like people who understand motion sensor would be able to appreciate it. Then we have so with the live video of the candidate, what it at the back end, the similar movement are being in terms of similarity search. The search is performed at the back end, at the admin end, and in that database itself, that attribute is taken into consideration and both the modes are selected. When we are selecting, so it's always good to have multiple modes for achieving or trying to achieve something which is negligible to an error. To do that, we are evaluating the overall scoring method, which is generally called as a similarity score, by applying whatever the formulation we are utilizing to perform that task. And then we have a rank based output, and then the candidate at the other end is able to select the same. So this is one way of understanding it. So when we are trying to understand the biomechanical information, it includes the kinematic information like joint angles, body position, ball and socket joint, the trajectory, the kinetic information, which includes the ground reaction force, joint movements, energy consumption information, which is total per body part energy expenditure estimated from the heart rate and the EMG data. So the output is providing a 360 degree view of the biomechanical information at a level which is understood by the experts in their particular fields. So this can be deployed for players also. When we talk about players, we are here referring to any of the games which are played globally. So this was something I wanted to discuss. Perhaps I'll look into another application also. So we will just focus on the AR VR aspect. So we will look into the classification here. So, okay, I have been asked a question. Funny thing a kid has said to you. Bhuvan, any answer? No. um, Funny thing. There are a lot of things I can talk about, but I refuse to talk about it right now. Anyhow, let's get back to the understanding of the classification here from the AR and VR aspect. First of all, we are trying to understand the architectural framework, which is general purpose architecture, and that is part of G0 6015 /005. So AR VR, the combination is called as mixed reality, and on top of it we want to add the quantum part. I'm not very sure, we are not going to talk about the quantum in this discussion. Probably I will come online again in a while and have a discussion on the quantum part also. So for the mixed reality, we have G0 6019 /006, editing of 3D images. That is basically uh, understanding the changing contours or color, aligning object, positioning parts. That is G0 60 T for tetrabyte, 19/20. So when we're talking about the user immersion with the virtual reality VR, that is part of G0 6F3/001, 011, not 001. It's okay, I'll repeat again. This is G0 6F3/011. So we are talking about 2D and 3D here, and we have a dynamic viewpoint of a service sensor. How does it work? Let's look into this. Okay. So here we are trying to understand a realistic augmented reality. We have a couple of sensors deployed here. So the first sensor is deployed to capture 2D video image of a real world performer, and that is from a first viewpoint. So here we are taking into consideration the angles. Then we have a second sensor configured to capture the 3D spatial information of the performer. So performer here stands for the candidate. Now, when it is surrounding a real world space from a second viewpoint, so what needs to be done here is we need to have multiple sensors in a circle so that we are able to take the angle of the performance from all the angles and then create that reality which is called as augmented reality. Okay, capturing is done. Then we have tracking module, which is to take the 2D video image and the 3D spatial information and a dynamic 3D position and orientation of the performer. The performer here is the candidate. Okay, this is simple. Let me see anything else we can take into consideration. Okay, just to push the limits, we are going to talk about the IoT aspect of the same. And here I'm going to give you some protocols and network architectural tagging part, which you can utilize for the development of the algorithms. Authentication is very important. Authentication, one way of authentication is the OTP, which is supposed to be one-time password. So for the authentication here, we have H0 4W12/06. Authentication. Now, when we are trying to understand and avoid the OTP part, because OTP itself is not very safe, we need to ask multiple questions just to make sure that the data is going to the right entity or the candidate. So multiple HACCP protocols need to be there in place, which are hazard analysis critical control points, and those control points are going to take care, which are much more than an OTP. For OTP, we have password manager applications, or it's called OTP applications. So it's H04W12/068. Small scale network, flat hierarchy based networks, it's H04W84/10. Gateway arrangement, we have H04W88/16. WLAN, that is wireless local area network, that is H04W84/12. So we are trying to understand an IoT gateway here and how an IoT gateway can work in the real world, and how or what should be the flow of the operational flow diagram or the flow chart. Okay, so we are going to talk about this gateway right now, and I'm just going to talk about the main gateway. Then we can obviously go through service set identifications and all. I don't want to get into that today, but perhaps maybe when we deep dive, already something is in the publication mode. It should be published. We are in the mid of November now. Perhaps end of November that paper would be published. You'll be able to see more data sets of what Impula network is all about, and you can deploy these and develop your own small applications to which is cheaper for the blockchain to work, which doesn't has gas fees or Ethereum, and it works like wonders, especially in a country like India. Okay, let's understand this. Okay. Now, in this IoT, which is Internet of Things, that means it has a communication network. The gateway automatically selects do two boot up paths. So the jalon stands for another word for path, and it doesn't store the router credentials and temporarily becomes a tiny Wi-Fi server and let the handheld device understand the target route credentials and switch to normal STA mode. So step-by-step behavior of this is how the power on happens. So WAN port monitors is determining whether there's an Ethernet cable or presence of Ethernet cable. If it is there, I think I should not get into the details right now. Perhaps what I'm going to do this, I'm going to write a detailed paper on this aspect. So November this is done. For the month of December, the Impula network, the deployment of the IoT sector in terms of the flow charts, flow diagrams, particularly from the standpoint view of creating a IoT gateway and encompassing the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. That is paramount right now. Thank you for watching this out. The quantum part of this, perhaps I'll deep dive maybe in the next session, not now. And if you have any questions related to whatever we are doing or wish to collaborate in any manner, send us a DM and we'll look into it. Have a great weekend ahead.